Hello, and welcome to another episode of Escaping Samsara podcast. I'm Nathan, and I'm here today with Robina Courtin. Hi, Robina.
Hello there, Nathan. Happy to be here with you. Oh,
Are you a
yeah,
monk? Are you a bikini? Are you a Tibetan nun? I don't.
I see what you're saying. No, I'm tradition. I'm ordained. Well, I think the ordinations are all the same, whether it's Thailand or anywhere. But my teachers are in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. But I'm a fully ordained. I got Gelongma. What do you call what in Sanskrit, whatever that word is. Anyway, I'm a nun. I'm fully ordained
Okay.
nun.
Right. How long have you been a nun for?
I've been a nun for 47 years, 47, 40
Wow.
years.
Wow. Sadhu. What a beautiful contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Um, so yeah,
Not a
what
fully
so
ordained
so
nun, novice nun first and then fully ordained later.
got it.
Anyway,
So
whatever.
yeah, so Robina, what's the first spiritual experience you remember having?
Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by spiritual, but I suppose I could say that my mother was a Catholic. My father was. My mother was a Catholic, and you'd go to mass. And I remember a very, very little girl um, seeing the priest and being so happy and announcing I was going to be a priest. I felt, wow, that's what I want to do, you know. And I remember they all laughed and said I couldn't be a priest because I wasn't a boy. But I think I must have been so young that I couldn't comprehend it intellectually. So, but I mean, apart from that, I'm a so-called spiritual. I mean, that's just a very strong connection. I suggest it as a strong connection I've got with monastic, you know, because then when I was a little girl, I was always very naughty, but I loved Our Lady and the saints and, you know, all those things. And when I was about 12, I was on my knees just begging my mother to let me be a nun like one of these great, like Saint Therese of Lisieux, this little Catholic nun. And anyway, that so it was very much a part of my life.
Right. So, like, how did you sort of end up following a Buddhist path?
Well, it was an evolution, I think. Internally, externally, it looked like Catholic, hippie, radical left, black politics, feminist, radical feminist, lesbian, Buddhist. That was the external. But I think internal, it was me looking for a way to see the world. I mean, and it was in terms of how to make the world a better place. I don't want to sound noble, but that was all my political activity. You know, that was that, expressing it, how to make the world a better place. But I kept sort of moving forward until I bumped into these lamas. Actually, at Chen Raising Institute in 1976, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, who are sort of they're my teachers now. They're the first teaching I went to, June 76.
Yeah, so Chenrezig is in Queensland, Australia, which is where you're
Yeah,
from, right?
there you go. That's
Yeah,
right, exactly. So I went there. That
cool.
was when I went there. So I think for me, the internal thing was I didn't say it like it's exactly, but very clearly, if I look back, I was always wanting a way to see the world. And I had the Catholic view as a little girl. I was in love with God and Our Lady and the saints and all those things, but didn't talk about it much because I was always on the outside. I was very rebellious and the naughtiest child possible. But this internal world I had, you know, and not in terms of guilt or anything. I never had guilt. I used to love the concept of God being everywhere, all this idea, and I think that lasted until I was about 19. Then it was time to kind of like say goodbye, God, hello, boys. And it was a very clear kind of progression. I didn't have guilt. I didn't worry about guilt. It was a waste of time. And then sort of hippie and all those things. That's about 10 years intensive kind of moving through various ways of seeing the world, always very committed. And I think I just kind of exhausted each option as I went. And then finally, I think I was doing martial arts after sort of this radical political activity, very strong, full time in England and the States and mostly there. And then I think I wanted something, beginning to find something spiritual again. I started doing martial arts and I was totally committed to that. And then some very kind man ran over my foot and stopped me in my tracks. And so I had nothing else to do. And I saw this poster that said Lama Yeshe at Chen Raising Institute. And so there I was. So since then, that's what I've been doing.
Cool. So,
So evolution.
yeah, like I was raised Christian evangelical style. And
Okay.
yeah, so I'm just interested, like because when you're young and you sort of have this sort of faith that you sort of grow up with,
Mm.
like I can recall having spiritual experiences in church praying, for example,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they correlate quite closely with some samadhi experiences that I have when I'm meditating. It's just that I'm interpreting them differently.
That's
So I'm just sort of wondering, like, I know this is quite a big question, but sometimes that just sort of points me to the idea that, like, there's a lot of similarities in terms of what internal states are being produced in these religions, and it's
I
just
think
a question of interpretation.
no, I think that's very true to some degree. But if we look back, I think if we look at the evolution of the Buddha, where he came from, and I'm only really now, I think, in the West are we beginning to appreciate these phenomenal geniuses, these Hindu yogis. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, it was these Indians, these genius Indians, more than 3,000 years ago. They're the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And so, as we know, they developed this technique that that brings us to this samadhi. And it's a level when you study the texts in depth, and you realize the state of mind they literally discovered. We've all got it, but they discovered it. I mean, it was just utterly ingenious. And it's astonishing that when you read the literature about the levels of mind that you can accomplish and the state and what those states are like, and the levels of cognition, there's nothing remotely like that in neuroscience or even in other religions, with greatest respect. There are no techniques like that in Christianity, with respect, nor in Islam. So I think it was these Indians. And then, so I think in some way there's many similarities. If I read my experience of these Catholics and all these kind of blissful experiences of some of these saints, completely devoted to God from the point of view of devotion, a lot of similarity there, I'd say, and blissful states, But in terms of skill and technique, I think you can't beat the Indians. And that's not being sectarian. I mean, they're not even Buddha. He didn't invent it. These Indians did before him, incredibly sophisticated skill. But I think, and the other thing it points to for me, for you, is obviously if you have the view of karma, whatever experience is not random. I mean, the Buddha's view, as you very well know, is not random. We bring our own stuff with us, and that's how come for me, as soon as I went to mass, I recognized it. It's like, oh, wow, I'm going to be a monk or whatever. And similar to you, I'd say, some obviously past karma, and you have those imprints in our mind.
Yeah, I think that's very good explanation. I think I would agree with that. And interesting also, you bring up the devotional aspect, because I think
Yeah.
for me, I sort of left the Christianity thing. Unfortunately, I didn't make the world a better place. I just became a pure nihilist, which wasn't fun.
Okay. Very nice.
And then yeah, and then sort of when I became a Buddhist, I was not so keen on any devotional stuff, because it reminded me of my upbringing. But just recently, with the kindness of my teacher, I have been doing more devotional stuff, and I think that is such a valid part of the sort of spiritual practice. It's really enriched my practice. So I think we wouldn't want to sort of. I mean, I don't know if I would want to downgrade devotion in such a way. I think it's so important, and I don't want people to get the idea that devotion is somehow second best, because I think it's so important. It's often
Sorry, I
rejected or left
why are
out.
you saying like, I don't understand why you're saying it like that. What do you mean by, and
Um,
what do you mean by devotion?
I'm just saying like devotion as opposed to investigation. Let's say,
Oh,
like,
but
I
there's no
think it's.
contradiction.
I don't want to
No,
make a dichotomy there.
but there's no contradiction. I mean, I think
No.
if you if you study math, you use your intellect and you analyze it. But then the more you have, the more you trust that teacher who's led you on the path of math, you're going to be devoted. You mightn't call it like that, but you have a very close relationship. It'll be one of your mentors. So I think devotion, meaning a closeness and a trust, would come naturally, whatever knowledge. I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
you're
a
right.
spiritual path,
Yeah.
just that we call it that in the spiritual path. You don't say you're devoted to your math teacher, but it's like that. Do you understand
Got
me?
it. Yeah. So we are sort of getting through this sort of series on the four thoughts that turn the mind. We sort of talked a lot about the four thoughts in general on previous episodes. So for this episode, wanted to sort of focus on the drawbacks of samsara. And if it's very early in the morning here and my brain's not quite working, or I would have actually brought
Okay.
one of the books that sort of gets into this in more
Yeah.
detail. But
Yeah.
maybe Venerable, you could just sort of maybe give us an overview of the standard like Tibetan view of this part,
Well, I mean,
the
the
drawbacks
Tibetan
of
view,
samsara.
it's the Buddha's view, but I suppose it's the way you frame it over the centuries, the different traditions frame it. But basically, it's the first stages of Buddhist practice. I mean, the very first teaching he gave was from his own direct experience, discovering that there is suffering, there are causes, you can get rid of both of them, and then the method of how to do it. And that's it. That's the Four Noble Truths, isn't it? And what he's describing is what he refers to as being stuck in samsara. Okay, we can refer to it in two different ways, it seems. The big picture point of view is the big picture point of view is the entire universe. You know, he divides the entire universe into these different realms of existence. He says there are trillions of sentient beings, and we're all in different stages of suffering. You know, you got, okay, and from the Indian perspective, you got the genius dudes who are in the subtlest level of samadhi, and they say that they call that liberation. Now that's where Buddha diverges in his own direction. He says no, they're not liberated yet, it's still in samsara. And so the definition here would be being in samsara, either whether it's in the big picture point of view of different realms of existence, or in general, it means being caught up in the neuroses, being caught up in the root delusion, the grasping at a sense of an independent, inherent self. If you've got that, you're in samsara. And then the bigger way of saying it literally is in terms of the different realms of existence you're born in, you know. But the real one is internal. It's the neuroses. I'm sure Buddha would have liked that term. So you got the root delusion, the root neurosis, the grasping at a real, solid, definite, inherent, permanent, solid me, isn't it? And on the basis of that, we've got attachment to get what that me wants. And then on the basis of that, we have a panic attack of aversion and anger when it doesn't get it what it wants. Well, there's your three poisons. And that's samsara, you know. And as well, I mean, as we often hear in the teachings, Buddha talks about 84,000 problems and he has 84,000 solutions. Whereas one of my teachers says 21,000 of those problems are rooted in the first neurosis, first delusion, the ego grasping. The second 21,000 are rooted in attachment. The third 21,000 are rooted in anger. And the fourth 21,000 have a character of all three. So it's this very integrated view of the mind in Buddhism, of all the neurotic states of mind that causes suffering. So being in samsara is being caught up in them and then being reborn and suffering lives. So you get out of samsara by giving up the delusions and then realizing selflessness and achieving nirvana, don't you?
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. That's very sort of, full explanation. My impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that when contemplating the drawbacks of samsara, isn't it also common to sort of think about it a bit more practically? Like, for example, about how literally nothing will ever make you happy permanently. Like, in
That's
fact,
attachment.
most,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
attachment. I'd say the summary, but then we can look into the real one, which of course effectively the Four Noble Truths would say that attachment, grasping, this, I mean, let's talk about that. We could spend the next month, you know, easily. Let's talk about attachment. Shall we do that then? This is the main drawback.
Sure,
So,
whatever you feel like. It's just that what I find with these contemplations, that what I find useful about them is that they just sort of counter the day-to-day sort of mundane mind, because my mind will, I'll meditate and I'll feel great, and then I'll go about my day, and within a few minutes I'm just back to, oh, if I get this thing, then the assumption is I will be happy, which
that's
is
right.
rubbish, because
That's right.
nothing
Well, that's
nothing
it.
can make you happy. In fact,
That's
I've
exactly.
always liked the whole idea of that in every happiness there is the seed of suffering, and then in every suffering there's the seed of happiness. It's just constantly sort of flowing like that, and sort of really deeply contemplating that, and bringing it home. Because while myself, I'll just talk about myself, I understand it intellectually. The habitual nature is to just go around assuming that, like, if I get X, Y, Z, if I get this amount of money, then, oh, I'm done, job done, which
I
is
think
just
so
ridiculous.
let's talk about this attachment. But I think the way you're describing it is at the very first level, isn't it? And this is where Buddha emphasizes giving. First of all, he gets us to the very first level of practice, and we never discuss this in the West actually, is he doesn't even talk about the mind. The very first level is, honey child, he's saying control the servants of your delusion, control the servants of your attachment and your anger, which is your body and your speech. That's why you live in discipline, live in vows, calm your body and speech down. Don't jump on every ball you feel like it. Don't put every cake in your mouth you feel like. You first control the servants of the mind, and that's already a profound level of practice, my feeling. But we don't tend to talk about that. We like the idea of meditating. Then the next stage of practice is now you start to get into the mind, you know. But let's talk about attachment. I think
Well,
it's
that's what I
taken
want to do, because
what
I think that's part of what I want to do with the podcast is I like to look at the bits that are left out, because everyone in the West knows, oh, okay, we sit down and we meditate. It's just like, dude, if you don't have basic sila, your meditation is not going anywhere. But the people don't want to hear about the sila. It's like less popular, right?
yeah, we don't like the idea of disciplining our body and speech. You know, we don't
But
exactly.
it's been a profound thing for me, because I was addicted to drugs. So the actual process of disciplining saved
Mm.
my life. So I'm actually super into it.
I think it's good to understand attachment. Shall we talk about attachment a little bit less?
Sure, 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 sure.
I think it's the very first level we know is as he talks about controlling the objects, this craving for the objects of the senses. But I think if we start to look at it more deeply through our own experience, we're going to see that it's multifaceted. And I think the most primordial level of attachment is this one of dissatisfaction, this utter belief that I'm not enough, I don't have enough, which is what drives, isn't it? Is what drives the overt expression of attachment. If I get that, I get that. But I think the deeper level I know, and the deeper level of attachment, and I think we don't really discuss this much, and I think it's very close to the way ego works, is this deepest craving, this deepest attachment to be seen and heard and approved of by others. My feeling is it's almost as if we're not a real person. We're like a half a person. We don't really exist fully until another person sees me and hears me and approves of me. And it sounds kind of cute, but I think it's really profound. There's a saying among the Tibetans, they say even the greatest yogis in the mountains who've given up the regular things, totally given up, advanced beings, they're still thinking about what the people down in the village are thinking about them. So this kind of schizophrenic sense of never being a whole self, but always dependent upon how other people see us and hear us. And I think that one is really what holds us back profoundly. And that's the subtlest level of attachment, I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, in Theravada they talk about conceit being one of the last things to be purified on the route
What do
to
you mean by
arahantship.
conceit? What do you mean by
Yeah,
conceit? What do you
yeah, I
mean?
don't know. Maybe it's a funny translation. It's some kind of yeah, I don't really know. Maybe it's a bad translation, but it's this idea
What
of
do you
perhaps
mean?
sort of feeling good about your practice or something like that.
What?
Feeling good about your practice, like this is
No,
going well.
that's not what I'm talking about at all. Something much, I
No,
think
no,
we're
you were
much.
talking about someone,
This,
this want of approving.
at this very primordial level, the very sense of self that we have is like of a half a person, and since we're born, all our actions are based on whether we someone smiles at us and then we think, oh wow, I must be a nice person, and if they don't smile at us we think I must be a bad person. I mean, this is just that's why we craved it. Almost seems so simple, it's almost ridiculous to ask why do we want to be liked at all? Why do we want to be liked? Because we don't approve of ourselves. I think this is the deepest way that ego functions. You got to look, why do we want to be liked? Look at the greatest suffering on the planet is not being liked, being disapproved of, being criticized. It absolutely makes us insane. Why? Why? Because this primordial mistaken sense of self and the hunger to be seen and heard, which makes us feel like I'm a real person. I think it's the
So
deepest attachment.
if we wanted to, obviously in Buddhism and all the schools, it's just all they have lots of different tools for working with this. So which tool has been most effective for you or people you've worked with at looking at sort of remedying this particular aspect of delusion, like
I
a meditation or a
No,
type?
yeah, but I mean, but I can't meditate. Okay, it's if I don't understand the words, if I haven't studied the teachings, if I haven't looked into the literature from the great meditators and beings in all the traditions over the centuries and don't understand even what Buddha means by the mind, if I don't even know what attachment is, if I don't know how it functions, how can I meditate on it? So for me, this is the emphasis in our tradition too. For me, the hugest part for me is having studied it and studied it hugely and then having to speak it and teach it this last 35 years. Every time I speak it, my own understanding of it goes a little bit deeper. So that for me is the absolute basis. How can I practice? How can I taste the experience of music if I haven't got the theory? So my feeling is I can't imagine a meditation that's based on not understanding what the mind is, not understanding what attachment is. I can't just look inside and something will reveal itself. I don't think so. I think it comes from understanding the teachings deeply, hearing the teachings deeply, and then digging deeper and deeper with that. That's my feeling. That's my experience.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So with this sort of studying, that sort of how's that been for you? How's that journey been for you? The which is
It's
like one of your
basically,
favorite
it's basically
texts.
oh, I don't know. I can't. I don't. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what. I don't know. Just all the. This is what my being a Buddhist means. It's studying the
Hmm.
teaching. I don't. But I think it's a danger in the West because we're such clever people. We've got such clever brains. We can easily get very captivated by all the marvelous philosophy and psychology and all the rest, and keep stuck in the head and not make it experience. That's the
I mean,
biggest danger.
if we're like thinking about this sort of approval, this wanting of approval in as a sort of part of samsara that's really holding people back. Is there any role for Western psychology in that process? Because it seems to me that, some people have dysfunctional childhoods and they can benefit from having psychological treatment alongside their Buddhist practice. What do you think?
I think it's up to individuals, whatever method. Okay, as we know, the bottom line for the Buddha is we've got this phenomenal potential in our mind to be free of all the rubbish, okay, in the mind. So my job is to work on my mind. So therefore, I would argue whatever method could use to help me do that, go for it. So if it, I think in our culture, we don't have a tradition of learning to, as one of my teachers says, learning to be our own therapists. We don't even know how to see into our own mind because we don't look. And it's only when we have serious dramas and my boyfriend leaves me that I then go off to the therapist and try to unpack it, because we don't have a tradition of looking into our minds. Whereas imagine if we're brought up that way, looking into your experiences, not just the external, then you'd have a method, then you'd have a basis, wouldn't you, of practice. So if a person needs to talk something through in order to know their own mind, but part of the problem I think in the West is, in our traditions in the West, because we believe that we come from our mother and father, that they created me and gave me anger and love and compassion, or we come from a creator. In both views, Buddha disagrees with that. He says we bring our own stuff with us. That's why I think the view of karma, I mean, many Buddhists don't even care about it, don't like it, but I can't even imagine how we can understand Buddhism without understanding karma. It's his view, it's the view of the world as far as he's concerned. And it was in his tradition well before that, and his culture well before that. So we come into this life programmed with our own stuff. So if I don't understand my own stuff, and if I only understand what my mother did to me, I'm in big trouble.
So
But am I right?
understanding, so how do you understand your own stuff, as you say?
Well, if I'm using Buddhism as my basis, if I'm using the Buddhist model of the mind, which I'm trying to, that means I have to understand it. And then on the basis of using that, I hear attachment, anger, these words. Then I look inside and I go, oh, that's what they mean. There it is. I mean, I don't think I can just look inside and go, there's anger. I can roughly know that. But if I don't have a clear analysis of exactly what it is and how it functions, how can I recognize it? I have to learn the theory first. That's what, for me, is really crucial.
I
I
see,
mean, if I'm
right.
trying to,
So
I mean, what I'm getting at, okay, what my one way I say is if I'm learning to be mindful of a garden, so I watch the garden, I think I could have such a clear picture of a garden if I concentrate strong enough. But what good is that until I learn to identify what I'm seeing? So I think we can get a bit nihilistic about mindfulness. Just watch your mind. Wonderful. But if I can't distinguish between attachment and anger, what's the point? If I can't distinguish between a weed and a herb, and I will never do that just by looking, I've got to learn the theory. And then I'll go, there's the weed, there's the herb, and now I can see the difference.
okay, I see. So it seems like what you're pointing to is a mistake in the way the Dharma is practiced in some areas where they're just being mindful of the mind
I
and
feel as
they're
if
not
it could become a
identifying
bit
the differences.
yeah, I think mindfulness is a start. You've got to have concentration and you've got to just watch and use something to focus on and not buy into all the rubbish. But at some point, I have to learn to know how to identify what's in my mind. I mean, Buddha talks about the delusions and the virtues, and they're totally, utterly different. I think even the etymology of the word, certainly the etymology of the word sangye in Tibetan, is sang implies the eradication of all the neuroses. That's nirvana. And then, and then gye implies the development to perfection of all the goodness. So clearly if the goal is to rid the mind of the badness, I mean, of the neuroses and develop the goodness, I have to learn to know what they are. How can I lessen attachment if I can't identify it? And it's not just a feeling. I've got to learn it much more precisely, exactly how it functions. That's my
I
feeling.
see. So
And I'm just
so are
describing the,
you
yeah. Go on.
so are you sort of when you sort of talk about studying the theory and learning to identify what the Buddha's actually talking about, like
Yeah.
like are you emphasizing that because you think like there are communities or the way Buddhism is practiced in the West, do you think they're skipping over that part, or are you emphasizing it
I'm
because
not,
it's very
I mean,
important
that
to you?
sounds rude. That sounds arrogant to say that, but I think it can easily, I think some cliched views, I would suggest some cliched views of meditation and maybe Buddhism, I think can easily not focus on that. There's no discussion about really learning to know what is it? What is exactly attachment? We can, what is anger? And then when you study the text in all the traditions, I mean, all this, the texts that they study in the Tibetan monastic university system are in the Theravadan tradition. All the teachings on the mind, all that stuff, it's exactly the same texts. And the level of clarity and precision they go into in their definition of each of these states of mind is really precise, And I think often in the West we don't consider that. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. I mean, just one, if I was to give a little counterpoint to that, and you'll have to excuse me if I'm doing this wrong, but
Oh, come on.
if
I'm here.
if so if there is maybe a tendency to, read something and then it's sort of in your head, right? So when you then go to meditate, instead of just meditating, right, you're sort of constantly trying to find the thing that you think the mind state that you think you should be having. Do you know what I mean? Is that a
No,
mistake that
I
people fall
don't.
into?
I don't think of it like that. But also the other point is, and we should be clear about how we're discussing here. We're using the word meditate, but there are many methods of meditation. I mean, there is concentration meditation where the aim is not to be discursive, absolutely. But there are other meditations where you do use, I mean, certainly in our tradition, where you're using very subtle analysis, and then on the basis that then you get some focus. So you do some type of analysis at a deeper level, and when some insight is triggered, you hold that insight and focus on it, and you deepen the insight all the time. It's a very sophisticated process. I
Yeah,
think it's coming through. Yeah.
that's been like slightly, I think in the Tibetan tradition, they it is like this kind of like discursive, almost sort of Socratic method with your own sort of consciousness or own experience. Whereas some of the Theravada traditions that I've sort of been practicing for a while, it's less of that kind of discursiveness, although it does exist. There are, for example, in
I
the
mean, all I
Thai.
can say is that go on. I'm listening.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so for example, the Thai forest tradition, they're very big on just looking at the body and just sort of taking apart your body. Am I my fingernails? Am I my
No,
heart? Am I
but
my
see,
intestines?
that's all I'm getting at. That is a really sophisticated analysis, and the result of that is to get an understanding of selflessness. That's exactly what I'm talking about. There are many techniques this way, many ways of using Buddha's teachings in that way that lead to the taste. Lead to the taste. In other words, if you think about it, you go to school and you learn that 1 + 1 is 2. It's a very precise theory. And you go, oh, wow, this is so complicated. I've never heard this before. So your teacher says basically go home and meditate. She's basically saying go home and do your homework. And what she wants you to do is think it. You've got to know what one is. You've got to be very precise. And then you have to analyze it carefully. And then at some point, on the basis of that analysis, you'll come to a conclusion. And that's an insight. You go, oh, now I get it. That's how this is very much similar with karma, with emptiness, with all of these teachings. You can do meditation. You get good concentration first. You take those concepts, you do analysis, and that'll trigger the insight, the vipassana. It's very valid.
So
It's very
how much
traditional.
when you say get good concentration first, how
That's the first
much
step.
how deep, how still, how much concentration is needed?
Well, I mean, you've got to have whatever you've got. If you've only gotten to the first or the second stages of achieving single, a shamatha, then you use that. But as you keep increasing your concentration, then you do your insight level, your vipassana, then that gets deeper and deeper. They both get deeper as they go. So you do what you can according to your own capacity.
Right, yeah, because there's some practitioners that might say, we want to focus on really like ramping up the concentration, first, and
That's right.
then go into Vipassana. But you're sort of looking at it as a more kind of like doing both, kind of equal weighting.
Absolutely, quantum capacity, quantum capacity. Yeah, the whatever degree of concentration you can use, you use that to get the insight, and you go back and
Mm.
forth. And even if you're not doing it on your cushion, I think about a major part of the application of this approach in your daily life. I mean, we forget all about, just like you said, oh, my meditation, blah, blah, blah. But as soon as you come down the kitchen, there's your wife slurping a coffee, and you start to get angry. I mean, you forget all about it. But if you're using this ability to hear your own mind, to hear the stories going in there, and you're walking from your cushion to the kitchen, and you hear the slurping, and you go, ha ha, honey child, look at your mind again. Come on, give it a break. And you do some analysis right there, and you get rid of the anger before you want to punch her. So being conscious of our thought and doing some kind of
Yeah.
analysis throughout the day, hearing the anxiety arise, listening to it, counteracting it before you explode. I think the
Great.
major
This is
bring these
this is
things into
the
your daily life.
yeah, and this is the beautiful thing about Buddhist practice is the gift, isn't it? Because it sort of just gives you another footing, doesn't it? Right. So rather than just being lost in samsara, just going from like one thing to another, there's always the option. It's always there, right? So like if something makes me angry, like I've always got the option of standing outside that and going, oh, okay, right, and that
But I
cools
say,
it
what
down,
do you mean
doesn't
by
it?
option? But if you say option, I wouldn't say it like that. If you're trying to be a Buddhist, you're trying to put it into practice every second, not just on your cushion. That means you're using the analysis to interpret the world, what the person said, what's that. I mean, you've got to be using it every day. If you're not being a Buddhist. You're just pretending. What else are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you being a Buddhist throughout the day if you're not doing that?
Well, I'm. If you is that a question to me?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'm not. I don't know.
What do you think being Buddhist means throughout the day? What does it mean to
Oh,
you?
well, I mean, I don't know. Like I just do my best, you know. I follow like
But what does
sila,
it
I
mean,
practice
though? No, but
parami,
what does it
you
mean?
know.
Now, what do you mean by that? Because life means you're involved with other people. You got a wife, you got children, you got the house, you got the next door neighbors, you got the traffic. So, what are you doing with your mind? How are you learning to be a better Buddhist in your mind while you're living regular life? What are you doing with your mind?
I mean, I can't say that I'm watching my mind and being mindful all the time because I'm not. I
Well,
have
then you're not being a Buddhist. I mean, that's the whole point, surely. But no, forget it.
I'm
I'm
not
not
sure
even.
how I can be
No,
mindful while
I'm
I'm
not even.
doing my
No, I'm not
work.
even being mind. No, forget mindful. Screw mindfulness. I'm not discussing that. How do you interpret Buddha's view of the world? Surely is a very clear, deep, precise presentation of his view of the universe. That's what it is. What else do you think Buddhism is? It's his view of the universe. Everything has nothing has an inherent nature. Everything is due to karma. The mind runs the show. Delusions cause suffering. Virtue causes happiness. Karma, impermanence, emptiness, these are all theories, but they're his direct experiential observation of the universe. So if I'm trying to be a Buddhist, I'm trying to replicate him. That means apply those views to my interpretation of the world. That's what being a Buddhist means. Otherwise, what?
Okay, I mean, I definitely do that. So,
Well, that's being a Buddhist.
well, good.
So
I'm
when someone,
glad that I
when
haven't
bad
wasted the last 15 years then.
In other words, if I'm a Christian, that's my view of the world. So I interpret it through that lens. So when a bad thing happens, if I'm being a really devoted Christian, I'll say, okay, God has a plan. He knows what he's doing, and I will accept it. If I'm a good communist, that's my view of the world. If I'm an Australian Aboriginal, that's my view. So it's really a view of the world. So if you're putting your money where your mouth is, you are applying it every day. So what does karma mean? Karma, is the view that whatever I experience is the fruit of what I've done in the past. All the happiness I experience is the fruit of my past virtue. All the suffering I experience is the fruit of my past non-virtue. So every time something happens, I interpret it like that. Instead of attachment, if you're being kind to me, I go greedily, be kind to me again, please. No, it's due to my past virtue. So I keep practicing more. You're using it to interpret your life every second. And that gets deep. Surely we're trying to get deeper and
Yeah,
deeper.
okay, I agree. So basically then if something good happens to me, I usually go and make merit. I'll give like a gift or do something for the temple. I'll do something, right? So
What do
this
you mean?
is
Sorry, what? Say that
so,
again. What?
so like if something good happens to me,
Like,
yeah,
give an example. What do you
like
mean?
I
Someone's
get a new
kind to you.
job, like I get a new
Oh, okay,
job
okay, good.
that I
So
want.
then go on.
Okay, then I will go and like give a gift to someone who's helped me, or I give a gift to the sangha,
Okay.
right?
But I'm
Because
talking about even
that
more basic. I'm even talking about more basic. How would you interpret why something good happened to you? Why did something good happen to you?
well, I know the right answer is karma.
Well, let's say it. Well, that's due to past virtue. So obviously, if something good happens to me and someone gives me some money, instead of greedily grasping, oh, aren't I lucky? I got more money. No, I must have been virtuous in the past. Wow, aren't I fortunate? I must be virtuous again, which is sort of what you're
And
saying.
give the gift because you
Give
want
it
to
right
be
back. That's
passing it
exactly
on to your
precisely.
future self and also other
That's
people.
exactly. No, that's exactly right. That's
Right.
right.
Okay.
A bad thing
So,
happened. You eat it up for breakfast and finish. Now you're glad you've just finished your shitty karma, instead of being all resentful and poor me and it's not fair, which is what anger says, isn't it?
so okay. So let's, if we can just sort of maybe just bring this back to the drawbacks of samsara. I know we've been talking about that the whole time, but I'm
That's
just
right.
wondering if we are to get like very specific for people, maybe there's someone listening to this who's like, well, what's wrong with samsara? Like, okay, I know like the world is fun. Like I have a good time. Okay, it's not perfect, but there's lots of joy in my life. I focus on the joyful things. I don't
That's
so
right.
much focus on
Perfect.
the bad
So
things.
then, okay. So I would suggest that the implication there is that samsara is l- like a place. No, you can live in I mean, the way that's how they talk about the bodhisattva path. You're in the world, but not of the world. So when you've, to some degree, even my feeling is given up attachment and anger and neuroses, and you have virtue and you're trying to practice virtue and goodness and selflessness, you can be a multimillionaire and not be in samsara. Or you can be a poverty-stricken beggar and be totally in samsara. It's all to do with your mind. So you got to know where you're
Okay,
at.
got it. Yeah, and I
That's
think
yeah.
most people would agree that their minds are not the funnest place to be, like a
That's
decent
right,
amount of the
exactly. We
time.
can see that, can't we? That's being in samsara. So we know we can have the most handsome boyfriend on the planet, the most money in the bank, and live in total nightmare. Or you can, like I've seen with some of my friends in prison. I've been working with prison people in prison for years, living in these garbage dumps, being treated like some animal, but because they practice, they are very happy and very content. This
Oh,
we
so
know.
say a bit more about that because I would feel that
Yeah.
like practicing in prison must be one of the most challenging environments, especially in America. That's where you are,
Oh,
right?
oh no, yeah, exactly. No, there's no question because the noise, I mean, the noise factor in most prisons is intense. I remember a friend of mine when I first got involved in this kind of work, like 30 years ago, actually, this young Mexican who's in this full-time, like a permanent, what they call permanent lockdown in one of these prisons in California with like 2,000, 4,000 people, and they're in their cells 23 hours a day, and they're mostly the gangsters. So there he is, this ex-Mexican gangster since he's 12 years old living in this cell 23 hours a day. And he says the main suffering is just the unbearable screaming noise, all these different cells, many people going crazy. He says it's like being in a rock concert all day. There's maybe 3 or 4 hours at night when it's a little bit peaceful. And that we can't even think about. We don't even consider that. So for the people I know in prison, some on death row, some really long sentences, they're so inspiring because they really realize that they're in the shittiest place externally and they don't have the luxury of choice. So they choose to change their minds. They're really amazing. So I have such respect. And that's the thing I think we see in our lives. Technically we've got freedom to go wherever we want, but we're paralyzed. So you hate your job. Well, you could leave your job, Robina. No, 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 it's horrible. I'll never get another job. I'm not possible. Well, if you can't change your job, you can change your mind about your job and try and see some good things so you don't be crazy. No, no, it's a horrible job. So we don't change the thing and we don't change our mind. We're like useless. So we live in this paralysis. Whereas these dudes in prison, they don't have the luxury of choice, but they choose to change their minds. I think it's very amazing. I have great respect.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Viktor Frankl book when he was in Auschwitz about
I
how
heard about it.
changing your
Exactly.
mind.
Exactly. And we hear these things, we go, oh, isn't that lovely? But we don't join the dots and we don't get it as a lesson for ourselves. It's incredible. I mean, like
I
all the
think,
time,
yeah.
even among Buddhists, all my friends, you have a drama with your husband, you get upset, and they say, what am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. I said, well, just can you look at the Dalai Lama? Have you not seen what he's been doing? Showing us example for the last 70 bloody years. Look at him, the nightmare happening to his country, and he's this happy fellow. I mean, you've got to join the dots. I mean, there he is. He puts his money where his mouth is. He's got every reason to be out of his brain with anger and rage and despair. If you look at Tibet, but look at him. Because he puts it into practice. He's such a good example. But we forget. It's so easy to talk, but we forget.
So, like these prisoners that you know who have
Yeah.
calmed their mind or at least found some peace.
No,
Um,
no, it's not a question. I don't say it like that. I would say who know their minds well, who are practicing Dharma seriously, learning to give up their shitty delusions, learning to be content with this suffering life, and learning even to be of benefit to others. Making it real for them,
right.
making it real for them, not just finding some peace. That sounds too cliched, in my opinion, with respect.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, that's a good point.
Do
So
you understand?
basically, it's about knowing your mind.
Knowing, I mean, this is the source of peace. Peace doesn't come to just watching your breath. 5 minutes of peace will come, but then you're back to your shit and you go down to the kitchen and there's a slurping of the coffee. So it's not just on the cushion. It's every single second of the day. Because I mean, this is what Buddha's telling us. All the delusions are not at the core of our being. We can change them. And I think it's like being a cognitive throughout the day. It's like being a cognitive behavioral therapist. You listen to your thoughts, you hear the slurping of the coffee, and I'm talking baby events, and you get annoyed. Then that's called anger. So come on, Robina, she's only slurping a coffee. It's really all right. Change your interpretation of it. That's what I'm trying to get at. That's how you put it into practice. That's what Frankel did. That's what my friends in prison do. They changed their interpretation of these outrageous experiences, you know.
And they
That's
changed their
where they find
interpretation
peace.
into what, Venerable? Into
Positive
what?
interpretation. Finding a way to use. I mean, my friends in prison, there's one woman, Sunny. I always use her as an example. She was in the 70s hitching in Europe, hitching, sorry, in Florida with a husband and hippie kids, hippie husband, and they got picked up by two guys, roughly speaking, and then got stopped by the police, and the guys killed the police and blamed the hippies. And she was on death row. He was on death row. He even got executed, his head burst into flames, whatever. She was there for 17 years, and she was just anyway, she talked about, she's not a Buddhist or anything, but it's why it's all the more amazing. She found her own way. She's in her cell 23 hours a day. She's got a Bible. They give her a Bible. And she realized that finally, at some point, she said, I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So what she did was not just something mystical. She worked internally with all her crazy thoughts, the anger, the emotion, the jealousy, the resentment, the fury, and could hear, and this is my point about Buddhist psychology, that those emotions are rooted in this clear conceptual story. If you wrote down all your feelings, what do you think anger would be saying? How dare this happen to me? This is evil. I want to kill them. They are thoughts, you know. So she worked on literally reprogramming her mind until the point that she became more content, more fulfilled. She did yoga every day. Then she could work on her freedom. You don't just sit there spacing out. You're changing the actual conceptual stories that the emotions are rooted in. This is my way I'd put it.
Okay,
That's a great.
so I mean, I think this is really important. So we're sort of pointing to the drawbacks of samsara, essentially just being the drawbacks of the untrained mind.
Precisely. That's exactly what it means, really, finally. I mean, Buddha
So
was a rich prince. He gave it up, but what he really gave up was his mind, was the neuroses in the mind. That's the point.
so this untrained mind, it's like there's that famous verse in the Dhammapada where he says it's like there's like no greater difficulty. I'm probably butchering it, but there's no greater you know, drag, to paraphrase it, than the untrained mind. And the trained mind is no greater beauty.
And a trained mind what?
No greater beauty. I'm going to look it up.
There you go.
Do you
That's
know
it. I
what?
mean, another way of putting that is getting, being able to, even at a fairly gross level, being able to be having your thoughts under control, change your angry thoughts into peaceful, change your jealous thoughts, change your unhappy thoughts, change your neurotic thoughts about yourself. It takes time, but that's just simply conceptual. It's cognitive therapy every single day. It's not
Okay, okay.
mystical.
I've actually found the verse. It's from the Angutta Nikaya 5-6. It's quite long, but this second part is quite good because I perceive no other phenomenon as harmful as the uncultivated mind. The
There
untrained
you
mind because brings great loss. Because I perceive no other phenomenon of such great advantage as the cultivated mind. The trained mind because brings great benefit.
There you go. That's exactly what being a Buddhist means.
Great.
Being your
So
own cognitive behavioral therapist. I tell you, he was the best cognitive behavioral therapist you can find. He was the best positive psychology you could find. I'm not kidding.
So, I mean,
Past
you also
master.
mentioned the different realms of existence. There's like in the
Yeah.
Theravada tradition, I'm more familiar with the six realms.
Well, of
So,
course, yeah. Well, that is the Theravadan teachings. It's the teachings that we share in the first stages of practice, all the views of the universe. Yeah, we got the
so
whole.
it sounds like that you're sort of giving a sort of you're using words like positive psychology and like a cognitive
I'm
being your
saying
own
those
cognitive
terms
therapist.
because we know those terms in the West, but I'm saying Buddha is he's your he's your expert at these. He like began this. He's like the expert.
Right. So, can you just sort of tie in the six realms of existence and how that might sort of affect or
Into
be part
this.
of the drawbacks of
Oh,
samsara?
okay, yeah, of course. Yeah, because if I'm in a human body, and that's first of all due to past virtue. That's due to non-killing. If a predominance of non-killing virtuous karma is in my mind at the time of my death, and they go to this in great detail in the Vajrayana system. They've got a very detailed description of the death process and exactly of how the 12 links play a role at the time of death. So my mind is peaceful. That gives an opportunity to one of the billions of karmic seeds in my mind of non-killing to be triggered. And this would have happened in our case. So even before you stop breathing, that virtuous karmic seed of non-killing from whichever life would have been triggered. That already programmed us, even before we stopped breathing, to find our way to our new mother's human womb when she hopped into bed with our daddy, right? So at the same time, so we've got the human body, but then karma ripens in three other ways. So the next way is your tendencies, your mental tendencies. So we can see you can have a human body, but you can be like Hitler. You can be a human body, but be like Mother Teresa, like the cliche. See, we want to try and cultivate the virtuous states of mind. Why? For no other, and stop cultivating the negative ones. Why? In this daily life, in this life, yeah, so I can be happy. But so that at the time of this death, I can be ready to get another human body. Otherwise, I'm in big trouble. I just jump it back into go back and become an animal or a spirit or a hell being again, and I'm in serious trouble. Then I've lost the plot for a while. So we want to keep practicing because our mind will continue until we've achieved nirvana. So we've got no choice about it. So we've got to take care of the long term as well as the short term.
Yeah, my teacher sort of says, on time of death, like making the aspiration to be born somewhere where there's Buddha Dharma. Is that part
Exactly
of it?
that, right? Bare minimum. Hell yes. But how to do that is this life by practicing it. I mean, if we practice tennis all this life, don't be surprised you're going to get born in some kind of, who knows what. We leave imprints in the mind, tendencies. So we stay close to the Dharma, have that aspiration, practice virtue, live in our vows, then death will be easy and we'll program ourselves for another very nice human birth and keep on bopping.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. So we discussed this on a previous episode, the sort of different sort of realms of existence, and I mean, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this. Like, if you were born as a ghost or a deva, would you still be able to practice Dharma?
I don't think, I think, no, if I know, well, if I take it, okay. It seems to me, first of all, the Buddhist model of the mind refers to all beings, all the way from the formless realm to the hell realms. That's what he means by samsara. So the deluded states of mind, ego grasping, the root delusion that clings to me, attachment to get what that me wants, anger when it doesn't, and all the others. Everybody's got those. But you'd argue in the animal realm, they would say that there's a predominance of those. They've got karmic imprints of past virtue, but they're buried deep under the weeds of all the delusions, and animals can't access their virtue. It's all there,
But
but
what
when you
about the
so
devas then? I mean,
well,
there
the
must be
devas,
some devas practicing.
I think there are some. They seem to
Well, because
say
if you
that
look at the text, if you look at the Buddhist text, there was, like Indra, Brahma Sahampati. He was the one that came and paid respect to the
yeah,
Buddha.
sure. I mean,
You know,
yeah, there are okay. If you're in the typical God realm, then as a result of plain old-fashioned virtue, you're going to get your physical energy will become like subtle. You'll have a subtle light body, and you'll be in this blissful state for eons, but so captivated because attachment is getting exactly what it wants. You're not interested in practice. But they do say there are some devas who do practice, sure. But of course, but the majority are like blissed out and don't practice, and then just I have to swear now, piss their virtuous karma down the toilet. So you get a miserable life next one. But if you're born as I remember one time Lama Zopa said, if we could just for a moment have a direct insight into the mind of our ordinary little dog, the mental suffering would be so intense we would not be able to bear another second of it. And that we do not think about animals. We just think they're cute because they're
is
ignorance.
that
That the
right? What is it about their minds that? I mean, I
it's, a,
understand that it's rooted in ignorance, but like,
it's
what
the
more
prominence.
practically is it?
Well, I think that just they've got the ignorance so total, so utter, and so complete, and the intensity of attachment and aversion and the other delusions that there's no space for anything else. I think it's hard for us to even conceptualize that because we've got
I mean,
access to
that's
so much.
what breaks my heart even more about the whole like animal intensive farming, factory farming industry. It's already heartbreaking, but to think about it in those terms as well
Oh,
just makes
exactly.
it
I
so much
understand.
worse.
No, it's so true. So true. Awful, terrible, terrible suffering, rebirth. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's
And the
it's
spirits
it's
are as
it's very so
predominant, but
sad.
the spirits are like little hungry ghosts flitting from pillar to post, completely driven by attachment. And then the hell beings, I remember you see, what I find very helpful also in the Vajrayana system, they talk about how the physical world is made of the four elements, which is sort of the Ayurvedics talk this way, the Chinese talk this way, and the Tibetan medical system talks this way. The physical world is made of the four elements, and that all of our minds are conjoined with their own set of the four elements. So if you, like as Swami Yeti said one time, a hell being, isn't some person in this hell sitting there kind of like sort of the devil waiting, ha ha, I'm waiting for this, the hell experience you could say is the result of the negative energy of that sentient being, and because we've all got a physical energy, because of the negativity, it's the physical energy is predominantly manifesting as the fire element. Your mind is conjoined with a fire element, so it's intense mental suffering. And then the spirits are predominantly joined with the air element, and we, like the animals, are conjoined with the physical elements. I mean, we've got the physical elements, and we
Yeah,
and
makes
we
sense.
take those experiences. No one sends us there. There's no punisher. There's no rewarder. We do it to ourselves. That's the tragedy.
I mean, I sort of like, what about the veganism idea? Just thinking about the animals, because
Uh-huh.
I mean, do you? Because we're talking about elements being conjoined with suffering, etc., etc.
No, no,
So
being concerned with the mind itself, with all virtues as well. I mean, this is how they talk in the Tibetan medical system. Your Tibetan doctor will feel your pulses, and she'll feel the imbalance of different wind energies coursing through your physical subtle nervous system, and she'll know it's connected to your attachment or your love or your compassion. So all the states of mind are connected to these wind energies, not just the negative ones.
I
Go
see,
on.
I see. So,
Yeah.
what do you think about the idea that if you eat meat, you're consuming the suffering on some level that animal has gone through?
I don't think so. I don't think that's true. I mean, I think if you eat meat and you have compassion, because let's say you're sick or something, your compassion overrides everything. I wouldn't think that.
Yeah, but like, let's say you're not sick. Let's just say you're just a
Yeah,
normal
because you're eating out
Westerner.
of, I don't know if you eat, I don't know if it's caught, but I think it could connect you with no, I'm not sure about that. But the thing is, for me, also veganism is good, but of course it is. But, I remember one time, this shocked me actually. I remember one time on Facebook, I put a picture. I was in Leeds in the UK, and I was in this fancy cheese shop, and I put a picture of me buying this kick-ass cheddar, and all the fundamentalist vegans, how dare a Buddhist nun eat cheese? They were so political and so shocked. And I didn't want to be political, but I always wondered two things. First of all, I wondered how many creatures got killed on the road when you drive cars, right? And I remember, sure enough, I Googled and someone's done the research. It's like per just the number plate, trillions of little sentient beings are slaughtered just by one car in a certain number of kilometers. And then I put that on the Facebook, and this guy said, "Oh, you can't help that. That's just collateral damage." And I thought, well, if I ate those bugs, then I'd be a monster. Because I don't eat them, it doesn't matter, which is so irrational. But the other one that even, let
Yeah.
me finish, hang on. This other story, I found it fascinating. I remember this Australian scientist got fed up with all the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians. I mean, the fundamentalists, the ones who shout and yell at everybody else. And he said he talked about this wheat field in out of Melbourne, and in the off season, all these field mice gathered there, millions of them. And he said they were so cute. They sang love songs, and he had photos of them. And of course, when they had to grow their wheat, what do you think they did to the field mice? They slaughtered them. They didn't care how. And even when I put that story on, this guy said, "Oh, that's just like you can't help that." So in other words, as long as this is why it's so irrational, if I don't eat it, it's all okay. But as soon as you eat it, you're a monster, which is completely irrational. So the real bigger point is that we can't even survive on this planet without harming others. So that all we can do is do our best not to harm others. But you don't think so wholly just because you don't eat the flesh that creatures haven't died. I mean, that's just bizarre. And that's how some people think. It's just too sentimental.
But I think though that I'm thinking about veganism as a form of protest against the factory farming, because these bugs on your windshield, they weren't factory farmed,
No, I
specifically
know.
created into a suffering realm.
I
It's like
no, there's
humans
no
have
doubt.
created a whole new hell realm just
We
because
have.
they like the taste of meat. That just
No,
seems
exactly.
abominable.
Of course, but I'm looking at the bigger picture of the suffering. This is being in samsara, darling. Nathan, this is one level of samsara. You can't even exist on this planet without harming others
For
brutally. And of
sure, for
course,
sure. But if
level
you
of
have the choice of whether or not to support an entire hell realm,
there's no
right,
question.
with your
There's
money
no
and
question
for
what you're
eating,
saying. I'm not arguing with that. I'm just looking at it at the bigger level. That's being in samsara. Just do everything. We must do everything we can not to harm sentient beings. Of course, we must do
yeah,
everything
yeah.
not to harm sentient beings. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Do you think there's any, do you think you get much negative karma from like, okay, let's say you're a normal Westerner, you're eating meat because you like the taste of meat, you think it's getting you protein, there's plenty of other protein sources, right? Do you think there's any negative karma from that because you're sort of like because of the animal that was like killed in great suffering?
Well, of course there is. How can it not be? Because we're mostly mindless. We don't even value animals. And even most religions say it's okay to kill it. I mean, I was brought up a Catholic, and they say that God made animals without a soul purely for our benefit to do what we want with them. So, I mean, it's like it's the view in many religions, even that animals, that whereas at least the Buddha's view, he says all these sentient beings suffering, at least we can do that. We must have compassion and at least do as minimum as we can to harm sentient beings. Of course. Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I think I heard somewhere that the whole idea of animals not having a soul in Christianity was like a kind of mistranslation that was propagated because people were making
Well,
money off
I'm
animals.
only
Probably
telling you what
true.
my Catholic, the
Yeah.
Catholic teachings say that. This is the Catholic teachings,
Yeah, yeah,
Whatever.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not criticizing, just looking.
No, yeah. Okay, so this has been very, very interesting. So let me think what I've sort of like learned from this. It's, I mean, I think you're totally right to sort of. I mean, obviously I wasn't thinking of Samsara as a place because that's just like obviously nonsensical. But I think it's really great to sort of really drill down into Samsara is the untrained mind, and the way and the drawbacks of Samsara isn't a kind of like, oh well, if I don't have enough money, then I'm gonna like suffer because I'll like look bad in front of my neighbors or something, right?
Right,
This
exactly.
isn't it. This isn't it. This is all about how
Yes,
you are studying your mind, how you are training your
yes,
mind, right?
yes. For our own sake and the sake of others, but for now, but also the future. And I think that we don't get in the West. We don't have any sense that we create ourselves. I mean, we know perfectly well if I want a beautiful garden in 20 years, I've got to start now. But we never think if I want a happy life in 20 years, mentally, I've got to start now, not to mention a future life. We just don't
Oh,
think that way.
absolutely. I mean, anyone who's sort of hung out with people who are very old, coming towards the end of their lives, I mean, you can just see the suffering, and it's not hard to sort of make the link that like, okay, if I practice my Buddhist practice, I think at least I'll have a chance when I'm really old to sort of like not fall into some of the difficulties those guys fall into. I'm not saying it won't happen, but at least there's a shot. Do you know what I mean? Is that
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah, of course. Of course, there's no
Hmm.
question. Yeah.
And then of course like next lives and karma and such. I mean, what's interesting is that the idea of rebirth that was I've discovered recently that was actually in early Christianity. It was one of the like heresies.
Oh,
It was one of the heresies.
I've heard that, but I've never really seen much. Is that really true, though? I've heard things
No, it's
like that.
true. There was a guy in like 400 AD, and there was a
Okay.
school of Christianity that thought, okay, we want to be like Jesus. Obviously, we can't get there in one lifetime, so God must reincarnate us so that we can keep practicing and become like Jesus. I mean, it's like, okay,
I
this is very similar to a bodhisattva idea here. And then, of
I
course,
see.
the church just squashed it. They're like, no, we don't like that. Squash.
I
And
see.
we'd never
Okay.
hear about it. But it's
I
true. You
understand.
can
I
look it up.
understand. Okay, good. I'll look it up. Okay.
Yeah. So Venerable, this has been wonderful. Thanks so much for
Good.
joining us and talking
Thank
on
you.
the subject, the drawbacks of samsara. And yeah, like I really hope this is of benefit for people. And thank you so much for
Good.
all you've done in your life.
Oh, total pleasure. But I also, but I also want to say one more thing too, that sometimes we get a bit fundamentalist about giving up delusions and being renounced and everything. But I remember one time when I first heard the teachings, and I thought these people are ridiculous when I was reading about listening to the Bodhisattva teachings. These people are crazy. How can you have such levels of compassion? And I remember the Dalai Lama saying, if you want to help others, practice compassion. And if you want to help yourself, practice compassion. So I think the biggest one for us is to see that we too are the beneficiaries of practicing virtue. It's not just something you're sacrificing yourself. It's the way to make yourself happy. And we shouldn't feel guilty about it. It's wonderful. I mean, it's a perfect method. So practice more love and more compassion and you get happy. Great. Double benefit. Do you understand me?
Yeah, I think that's so true.
Yeah, no question.
It's surprising. I'm surprised that's not even obvious. Do you know what I mean? Because like if you're in a
We get
compassionate
guilty
mind
about,
state, you're
oh,
not
that
suffering.
sounds selfish. We'll say, oh, that sounds selfish, or we can't be like that. So we get all kind of, if we get caught up too much in, I'm bad, I've got to give up guilt and all this rubbish. We can get a bit miserable, I think, when we think about spiritual. We're supposed to be happy when we're spiritual, not miserable. So giving up
Yeah,
samsara could make
absolutely. Yes, yes, exactly. This isn't about sacrificing. It's like there's that traditional metaphor or simile, it's like holding a hot coal, isn't it? And it's all like, oh, I just need to let go of this hot
there
coal.
you go. Very nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
you
well,
keep doing
well,
what
thanks.
you're doing. You're doing a great job. It's wonderful, Nathan.
Okay, well, thanks so much. Is there any sort of places that people can find out more about you or your organization before we go?
Oh, yeah, yeah. My website, the Robina Courtin, there's a website there. And then it shows where I belong there, so they can go to that other website there. But I've got a website there,
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. So,
robinacourtin.com.
Rabina, thanks so much.
Good, darling. Thank you. You're doing a great job. Keep going.